This is Boomer Life on CL 650.
You load 16 tons, what do you get? Another day older and deeper in debt. St. Peter, don't you call me, 'cause I can't go. I owe my soul to the company store.
Ah, the company store. 16 tons. We're talking debt on this episode of Boomer Life here on CIL 650 with our guests from Abakhan and Associates, trustees and proposal administrators. They are George Abakhan and Brett Luckin. Gentlemen, we've been talking about remedies to debt issues. You are professional trustees. There are only about 1,100 trustees in all of Canada, fewer than 90 here in British Columbia, and 2 of them are right here in our studio right now. So we might as well take advantage of this expertise. Talking about proposals, consumer proposals, and bankruptcies, the 2 remedies that you 2 administer as trustees the most. You're doing more proposals than bankruptcies.
65-35 in our firm.
Okay.
Probably in BC, it's probably about a 50-50 actually, I think, in BC. And then throughout Canada, perhaps there's a slightly more, the percentage may swing towards bankruptcies.
Yeah,
okay.
Across the board. 45, 55
45
or so.
proposals, 45 settlements versus 55
bankruptcies. Logically, the reason why proposals are something that seem to make sense, particularly for us in terms of looking at someone's financial situation.
Right.
And figuring out exactly what kind of solution can resolve their debt, is that in a consumer proposal, many people who come and see us actually do in fact want to repay their debt.
Yes.
And in fact, in many cases, have been sitting for a year, 2, 3, 4 years, and trying to do exactly that, but just not able to see their way out of the hole.
And one of the, and I'm interrupting, but this is an important sidebar. One of the things, because we're raised to be honorable people by and large, Canadians the world over are respected for our sense of fair play and generally speaking, our willingness to honor our obligations.
Yes.
At least that was the way we were raised, and some of us stray a little bit. But it's those of us who do try to address these increasing financial issues, Brett, sometimes do ourselves an enormous disservice. In the process of trying, however unsuccessfully, to bail ourselves out, we will empty an RRSP.
Yes,
we will take our
that's
life
right.
savings and try and pay off our debt with that, unaware of the fact that were we to file a bankruptcy, or I'm assuming a proposal as well,
Yes.
then that RRSP is untouchable. We wouldn't have to exhaust our life savings.
Yes, the logic is that in a bankruptcy, your trustee will get to claw back whatever you've put into your RRSP in the last year.
In the last year. But everything before
everything
that
prior to
is
that
isolated, right?
It's exempt. And I think what's key here is that you're right. You actually just hark back on, there were 5 things that I indicated are mistakes that people tend to make while they're trying to resolve their debt themselves. And one of them is in fact that they completely empty the RRSPs. And when they're doing that, they're not emptying the RRSPs in order to give themselves a fresh start by paying off their debt. What they do is they empty their RRSPs incrementally over a period of time, and they're simply using that money to service their debt, but never actually really resolving it. And that's obviously a key mistake that you wouldn't want to do, because you get to some point in the future and in fact you have not resolved your debt, you still owe the money, and now you have no RRSPs and now you're having to go bankrupt.
Right. As a matter of interest, I'm going to throw in a side issue here. The same thing happens with corporations. I mean, we just don't do personal bankruptcy. We don't do personal settlements. We also do corporate settlements and corporate things. Mm-hmm. And in corporations, they don't have RRSPs, but they have Revenue Canada. So the owner of the last resort, or the lender of last resort, is Revenue Canada, CRA.
Right.
So what happens is they don't pay their source deductions, they don't pay their GST, but they don't realize that they're all personal obligations. So, because they're directors.
All right.
So what happens is, as in the RRSPs, you get this incremental winding down of your RRSP to pay debt. Here you get incremental increases in your Revenue Canada debt to pay your current liabilities, when you should have gone to a trustee, ourselves hopefully, to have it analyzed and figure out before you end up having to pay that debt personally. Because source deductions, if it's not paid by the corporation, ends up being a director liability or a signing officer liability. You don't have to be a director. So the same with GST. It's a personal liability.
Ah.
So it helps to go to somebody like ourselves to have it analyzed. No cost in our case.
Is it a myth, Brett, that in every resolution of debt, no matter what the outcome, whether it's a proposal or a bankruptcy, automatically the Canada Revenue Agency is always paid first? Is that almost the law?
No, that's not true.
So it is a myth.
It is a myth.
Okay.
There are certain kinds of CRA debt, source deductions being the most obvious one, where they are stand in front of everybody, but that's primarily if you're a sole proprietorship with
or a corporation.
Or a corporation where you've got salaries, wages, where you're deducting off the income of the employee, and you're supposed to be paying that over.
That's trust money. That's trust money as far as CRA is concerned. As in general, it's trust money.
But the rest of CRA debt, no, it's not something that necessarily gets paid up front. Very often, if you have made the mistake of doing as George said and running CRA debt up through the ceiling, they may have a very strong control over some kind of bankruptcy or proposal you may need to file as a result of that, which then, just like any other creditor, gives them the ability to fail, negotiate, demand more, create conditions, or whatever it might be.
The part of the myth that you mentioned about CRA being in front probably comes from the United States, because in the United States you can't compromise IRS debt.
Oh, okay.
And IRS debt is outside of the Bankruptcy Acts down there and continues on.
Once again, guilty as charged. Watch too much American television. I guess that's it. Wanted to ask about the implications of filing either a consumer proposal or a bankruptcy on your credit rating. Obviously, you kind of hit rock bottom when you have to go through that process of either one. But which, Brett, most adversely affects your credit rating, and for how long?
Well, I want to dial back a bit, just point out the obvious, and that is that if you're in financial dire straits and you have already been defaulting,
there's not much left of the credit rating to begin with.
Had a car seized or whatever it might be, it's unlikely to worsen the situation you're in from a credit report or credit rating point of view.
Oh, I'm looking at the lasting implications.
Right. If anything, you're drawing a line in the sand and now actually trying to find your way up rather than going down a hill. You're going up the hill now.
That's a fair point,
okay. Having said that, generally speaking, it's recognized that a consumer proposal will smack you at an R7, whereas a bankruptcy will be an R9. And if you're just using those as sort of ratings, R9, you can't drop any lower than that.
Okay.
Practically, what it will mean for you is that for at least 18 to 24 months, it will be difficult for you to get credit.
Okay.
Although there are methods, and during a bankruptcy or proposal, you go through a counseling process which will explain to you how you can rebuild your credit and methods of doing that.
So there is an educational component as well, George, to filing either a consumer proposal or a bankruptcy. The law, and in this case your trustee, will require you to go through a couple of information and learning sessions about budgeting and such.
Well, it's the Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act that sets out that you have to have 2 counseling sessions. Those counseling sessions are actually incorporated into our fees, and we pay them for the debtor. We set the time, we set the place, we set the counselor. Sometimes we do it ourselves because most of our trustees and senior administrators are accredited counselors. But in any event, whatever those independent counselors are paid, they're paid by us, and it's taken out of the fees that we get on the servicing of a settlement or a bankruptcy.
And as George points out, they're actually compulsory. It's part of the rehabilitation process.
Yeah, it's obligatory. If you go through the process, counseling and that information is essential.
And you should use that, in fact, as a method of educating yourself on how to improve your financial health going forward.
The funny part of it is that some of the people that certainly I interview, they say, oh, we really you have to do counseling? Oh, I'll look forward to that.
Yes.
Interesting.
The same with myself, in fact. Yes.
Right.
Many people People say, well, that's great.
Learn.
Anything I can get that will help me. Yes.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, we'll talk more a little about. We need to take a break here, but when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about restoring one's credit after going through this process. And George, I'd also like to get some of your thoughts as you. I know you have a session coming up with a person who's of retirement age, who's facing some pretty serious financial issues, and I don't expect that individual is the only 65-year-old human being in British Columbia with some serious financial problems. So we'll talk about boomers and seniors and the debt loads some of us carry when we continue here on Boomer Life on CIL 650.
Canada's only weekly radio show dedicated to the baby boomer lifestyle. This is Boomer Life on CIL 650.